Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, December the 9th, 2024. Today I want to talk a little bit about Brian Thompson. He was the CEO of United Healthcare, who on December the 4th was gunned down in the streets of New York. And we do have a date of birth for him, and yeah, it would be a good idea to look at his horoscope. Now, I do understand that people watching this video are going to have a variety of views about him. And, some of you may just see it as just being a tragic murder. Someone was killed in the streets, and that was a terrible thing. Others might be unsympathetic. He was CEO of an insurance company, claims were denied. You could say, well, yeah, one person died, but how many people died because these claims were denied? And so it is a bit of a problem. And so I want to kind of look at his chart, I suppose, in a critical way. I mean, I have looked at his chart. I have drawn a few tentative conclusions, but I do think that there's something about him, looking at his chart, that is quintessentially American, and he perhaps represents what it is to be American, or at least some of the contradictions in America. And that is one way in which I want to look at his horoscope. But if you feel that it was just a tragedy, it was just a murder, then perhaps you might be concerned with some of the things I say. I have to look at him as head of an insurance company, or CEO of an insurance company, and insurance companies have to make their money, and they have to sometimes boost their profits by denying claims. So that is what I'm going to be looking at. But before I look at Brian Thompson, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching of today, which is Monday, December the 9th, 2024. So here is the chart for today, top right. That is Brian Thompson. And so looking at what's happening, we have the moon starting to move into Aries. So it's going to be a bit of a moon in Pisces, moon in Aries day. I mean, in the United Kingdom, the moon moves into Aries at 13:38. In other words, 1:38 p.m. So if you're in Europe and Africa, the moon moves into Aries sort of early afternoon, kind of after lunch. So you might notice a real difference between the morning and the afternoon. So the morning, sort of late Pisces, things may not be very clear. So if you're European or you're in Africa, you might get an impression of how the day is going to unfold in the morning. It all seems a bit nebulous. And then early afternoon, there might be a sudden change. As the moon moves into Aries, things suddenly start to become more definite. Now, if you're in the Americas, that means that, well, the moon moves into Aries pretty early. So if you're in the East Coast, for example, that means it will move into Aries at 8:38 a.m. So in the Americas, you can really regard it as a moon in Aries day. So moon in Aries is very definite. The moon does make a conjunction to the North Node in Aries. And so with moon conjunct North Node in Aries, that is in some respects a call for action. It is not a time to just do nothing. You've perhaps used your feelings to work out what's going on. You've perhaps drifted around, but now the time for emoting is over. And so that's if you're in the Americas. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, really, it's a moon in Pisces day, and perhaps your experience of the day is going to be somewhat different than if you are in the Americas. And really, that's it. We've just got lunar aspects. Moon in Aries. Moon makes a sextile to Pluto. It then makes a sextile to Venus. It makes a trine to Mars. And that's perhaps interesting. We've got a Venus-Mars opposition forming. So when the moon moves into Aries, it makes a sextile to Venus and then starts moving towards a trine of Mars. And also it makes a sextile to Pluto. So I think the moon is pretty useful in Aries. It is actually a big difference. Moon sextile Venus, it's able to get on with people, but in actually quite a dynamic way. And then, of course, moon moving towards a trine of Mars. So I think there is a big change there, and it may well be that the experience of those of you in the Americas may be very different than if you are, say, in Australia or New Zealand. So if you look at the chart for today set for New Zealand, actually Sydney, not just New Zealand, Australasia. If we look at the chart set for Sydney, Australia, you can see that at noon Sydney time, the moon will be at 22 Pisces. So the moon has still got some aspects to make. It's still got a sextile to Uranus. It's still got a conjunct Neptune. I think the conjunct Neptune is particularly important. So Australia and New Zealand, probably the main aspect of the day is moon conjunct Neptune. There's nothing that has to be done. And if you were to try to do things, well, you might get a bit confused. You might not know quite in which direction you're supposed to be going. And also the moon moving towards Neptune is on skeet. So in Australia, and I suppose also in Europe, be careful with anything to do with water and plumbing, and don't take risks around water, I suppose. But in the Americas, I don't think that that's going to be something to worry about. As far as the heliocentric picture today is concerned, so here it is. Here are the positions of the planets when we put the Earth at the center of the solar system. The Sun at the center of the solar system. So that Earth-Jupiter conjunction that I've been going on and on about has passed. So I'm recording this on Sunday. I did highlight that Earth-Jupiter conjunction, which of course is a Sun opposition Jupiter, as creating the potential for something disastrous. Looking at the news on a Sunday morning, okay, the big news, I suppose, is the fact that the Syrian regime has collapsed. I'm not going to be talking about Syria today, Monday. I'm going to probably talk about that for Tuesday. I suppose that's an event, but it's not the kind of disaster that perhaps I had in mind. I suppose I'm recording this on Sunday, so something may unfold over the course of the day. But that Sun opposition Jupiter, or the Earth conjunct Jupiter heliocentrically, is starting to pass. So maybe, aside from Syria, we're not going to see a huge event. But if you're looking at this on Sunday, the influence is still there. I mean, let's look at this Earth-Jupiter conjunction, say, on a Monday or a Tuesday to really be able to say that really nothing much happened. But of course, there's always something happening, isn't there? Now, aside from the Earth-Jupiter conjunction today, which is a separating Earth-Jupiter conjunction, we do have a Mercury-Mars conjunction, heliocentrically, of course. So that Mercury-Mars conjunction, people have a lot to say. There is a lot to say. And some people are perhaps a little bit angry, things annoying them, things irritating them, and so that might be reflected by that Mercury-Mars conjunction, and just a certain uneasiness. And if there's something we don't like the look of, or we need to complain about it, we're going to want to complain. Or if it's not us complaining, someone else is going to complain. And so people are going to perhaps be quite strident in their language. And I would have said that is the broad heliocentric picture. I don't think there's much else to report except we have a Jupiter-Pluto sesquiquadrate. Now, that Jupiter-Pluto sesquiquadrate heliocentrically, we also have it geocentrically. And I think it's in a couple of days' time we see Jupiter-Pluto sesquiquadrate geocentrically. And so Jupiter-Pluto aspects are about the struggle for self-improvement. That's one way of looking at it. Certainly in the most positive way. Jupiter-Pluto can take things too far. We really want things to happen. We really want to push them, and we make them happen, and then I suppose we have to deal with the consequences. It can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. I think ideally with Jupiter-Pluto, we think about ourselves and we don't project too much. Don't blame other people if things aren't perfect. We just need to focus on ourselves and what we can do. When we have improved ourselves as much as we can, only then can we start worrying about the imperfections around us. So anyway, that's the heliocentric picture, and now I want to consider today from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, December the 9th, 2024. Aries. Aries, the moon is moving into your sign, and quite when this movement happens does depend on your time zone. I believe around 50% of the people watching this video are in the Americas, in which case the moon moves into Aries fairly early in the morning. So it's going to be a moon in Aries day. If you're in Europe or Africa, moon will move into Aries sort of approximately early afternoon. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, moon will move into Aries sort of really effectively tomorrow, or very late tonight. So when the moon moves into Aries, there is a change, and it is a time when you have to make things happen. Generally, this is a time when there is a certain obligation on you, Aries, to act. And, we can see this by the fact that the North Node is in Aries. North Node is where you're supposed to be going. North Node is not going to stay in Aries forever. You can see that the North Node at 3 degrees 31, it's soon going to be out of the sign, because the North Node, by and large, goes backwards. Okay, I use the true node, and sort of the true node does sort of oscillate, sometimes goes a little bit forward, but its general trend is backwards. And so the moon will be in Pisces, and that will be very different. But while the moon is in Aries, it's a time, Aries, when there are things you need to do, when you need to put yourself first. By putting yourself first, in many ways, you're putting the world first as well, strange as that might sound. And so with moon in Aries, you start to feel in your element, and the moon is making a sextile to Venus. Now, even if you're in Australia or Eastern Asia, the moon is still making a sextile to Venus. It's still applying to a sextile to Venus. And so with the moon moving to a sextile to Venus, it does make you sort of more friendly, more sociable. I think that you know how to get on with people. And I think in most cases, people are going to like you, and they're going to like your enthusiasm. And it's not just the fact that the moon is moving into Aries, it's also the fact that the moon is starting to apply to a trine of Mars. And that moon trine Mars will give you a real boost, and it will give you a sense of, not just what needs to be done, but what needs to be done for you. That moon trine Mars is very creative. You have things that you want to do that are important to you, and you shouldn't compromise. If something matters, then just do it. And that is a natural Aries approach. It's just natural. It's intrinsic to your sign. And I think that your overall approach, will be appreciated. It's a day when, in a general sense, I think that people are going to like you. You're just going to be energetic and exciting, and that's going to make it sort of easier, for example, for you to form new contacts, new links, finding out what you and other people have in common. But on a more specific level, if we're talking about sort of one-to-one relationships, we shouldn't forget that Venus is starting to move to an opposition of Mars. Now, that Venus-Mars opposition isn't going to be exact for a few days, but it's getting there. And we can literally see Venus-Mars opposition as you and someone else having a difference of opinion, or you and someone else recognizing that each of you are very different. And that Venus-Mars opposition is in fixed signs. So, Venus is in Aquarius, fixed sign. Mars is in Leo, fixed sign. And so, one likes to talk about compromise. Whenever one talks about disagreement, I say, can you find a compromise? Compromise, always good to compromise. But with fixed signs, is there really room for compromise? Yes, some people are fixed in their opinions, and it's okay to be fixed in your opinions. So in terms of one-to-one relationships, tread carefully and don't assume that your way is the only way. But if you find that someone else has a different opinion, a difference of opinion, or a different approach, it may not be a time when you can argue with them, find any middle ground. That just may not be possible. This is an opposition. William Lilly said that squares are perfect enmity, oppositions are perfect hatred. I think he said that in Christian Astrology, which I think he wrote in the middle of the 17th century. So be very aware of that. Now, one word, if you are in Australia or New Zealand or Eastern Asia, for most of the day the moon is not in Aries, the moon is in Pisces. And so if you are in Australia or New Zealand, or indeed in Europe in the morning, it perhaps is not a time to take the initiative. You need to wait. You're almost ready to do it, but there is this conjunction between the moon and Neptune, which is in quite a secret part of your chart, and there just may be things you need to think through, work through, and you just may not be ready to take the initiative. And so don't allow yourself to be hurried. Just go with the flow. But don't worry, the moon will eventually move into Aries, whether it's early afternoon or late evening or perhaps even tomorrow morning. It will happen in the end. Taurus, it may be a time when you feel that you don't really want to entirely be at the center of things. It just might not feel like being the right thing to do. Maybe if you're too close to the action, then your impact may be watered down. That's what you think. You want to have an impact. And so if you want to have an impact, you might think, yeah, you do go close to the action. But if you do go close to the action, it's just possible that you are overwhelmed by it. And that might be because you simply don't understand what's happening. You try to understand, but still it doesn't entirely make sense. And so I think that you need time to work it out. And one way in which you might try to work things out is to perhaps get other people's advice, see what other people have to say. But I think it's a situation where other people's advice may in many cases be worse than useless. You have to try to make sense of it on your own, and yeah, that could take time. But that doesn't mean to say that you have no impact. I think you do have an impact. I think that if you want to, Taurus, you can make things happen. But is that going to be advisable? Just because you can be assertive doesn't mean you should be assertive. Because when you try to make things happen, in a way, it's kind of your responsibility. And you've taken it upon yourself to create something, and then you've got to deal with the consequences. And the consequences may not actually be very good. So perhaps you should try to hold back and just not reach conclusions. I think that would be perhaps a good idea. Though, in a sort of gentle sense, the moon is making a sextile to Venus. And the moon sextile Venus is, I would have said, quite pleasant. It allows you to have a gentle influence. Now, you can have a very powerful influence if you want, but as I've already suggested, I don't think you should use all of the power available to you. Yes, I think you do have a lot of power available, but I think if you were to use it all, I'm not sure it would get you anywhere. Rather, just be satisfied with small gains. And I think a bit of self-discipline could actually go a long way. Now, one thing I should mention is the fact that Venus is starting to make an opposition to Mars. It's getting closer and closer to Mars all the time, and later in the week that Venus-Mars opposition becomes exact. And that Venus-Mars opposition may be about some kind of conflict, a difference of opinion. Mars in Leo retrograde may represent someone who you feel you have to deal with. Could be a member of your family. Could be a male member of your family. I mean, it might not be, but it's just someone who's got a bit of an attitude, who is quite proud, loyal as well, but certainly proud, and is a little bit uncertain of themselves deep down, but tries to give the impression of being in control. I don't know if anyone fits that bill. I don't want to be like a psychic, like a psychic performance, saying, is it like this? No, it's a man. Well, no, actually it's a woman. Well, maybe they're like this. You prompt and prompt and prompt until you give the impression of being able to see some wonderful vision, when of course it's just a psychological trick. So I don't want to overstate the matter, but it's possible that there is a man, possibly a man, could be a man. I suppose it could be a woman, but just someone who has a high opinion of themselves, who is nonetheless a little bit uncertain deep down. But that kind of person could cause problems for you, and they may have to be negotiated. And I don't think it's a situation where there's much in the way of compromise. I don't think that can happen. But that Venus-Mars opposition, in a general sense, may just indicate that certain relationships could start becoming problematic over the next few days. Gemini, you're probably not too badly placed. The moon is moving from Pisces to Aries, and both Pisces and Aries in the Gemini horoscope are actually quite high profile. I mean, in the Gemini horoscope, Pisces is often about career and status, whereas Aries is about socializing and friendship. But they're both signs which are about you being in, I won't say the public eye, but you're certainly getting attention. And so maybe the sign change from Pisces to Aries is not going to be so dramatic, though I think with the moon moving into Aries, the moon might move into Aries this morning if you're in the Americas, it might be early tomorrow if you're in New Zealand. Whenever the moon moves into Aries, it's a time when you're going to be, I think, quite sociable. You'll enjoy people's company, and you'll have an approach which is fairly reassuring. The moon is making a sextile to Venus, so I think Gemini, that you can be yourself, and I think that you can be quite pleasant, but try to keep it light. Some people can't handle serious issues, and you may want to go into areas that other people don't want to go into. And I say this as a Gemini because I've got my sun in Gemini, and it's just possible that you're interested in things today which other people don't want to talk about, and they regard it as being inappropriate, or you want to perhaps discuss things that may, in some people's mind, be in bad taste. And so, Gemini, really do consider your audience, consider the people you're dealing with, consider their sensibilities. As far as a Gemini is concerned, words are words. You open your mouth, the words come out, and the words just vanish into the ether very often. I mean, it's like these videos. I'm a Gemini. I put these videos up, and I suppose people watch these videos to some extent. My videos never go viral, but it's a couple of thousand people watch them. But 24 hours after putting them up, no one watches it. That's it. It's gone. And so that's part of my view with these videos. I can't take them too seriously. I can't be too precious about them, because after 24 hours they're gone. No one's watching them anymore. And sort of Geminis can take that view with what they say. You say something and it's gone. But other people are often more sensitive than you are, and you may be tempted to go into areas that just don't work. They don't go down well. And so be careful about your words, and perhaps also your behavior. You may want to do things which are not necessarily advisable. And a few Geminis might be in a mood for taking risks. Getting involved in something that has dangers, that might involve meeting people who you perhaps shouldn't be meeting, or getting involved in activities that may not be wise. So try to be a little bit cautious. And just because something is interesting doesn't necessarily mean that you should go for it. Perhaps it might be a case of curiosity killed the Gemini. So Gemini, I think in that sense, try not to take things too far. But as far as your overall approach on a sort of forgetting about being dramatic, getting involved in things which may be dangerous, I think that it's a day when you can be quite sociable. The moon is making a sextile to Venus, and I think that you can enjoy people's company, and I think people will enjoy your company. And always make the effort to consider what other people are doing, what their priorities are. Geminis can often talk too much, and they can talk too much, and then they forget who they're talking to. They forget they forget the other person's priorities. They don't take the time to listen. Geminis can do that. Sort of, me as a Gemini, I can do that, and it's a sort of arrogance that I have. But I try my best to counteract it. But that is part of being a Gemini. So make an effort. Really do really do try. It does matter. And really, Gemini, I think that's about it for today. I don't think there's anything too dramatic going on. So have a high profile and just see what other people have got to offer. Cancer. Cancer, the moon is moving into Aries, and so with the moon moving into Aries, you're starting to really get into your stride. You're developing the right approach, and I think that it kind of might be a bit of a two-step process here. You've done a fair amount of thinking, I think. I think you have tried to work things out, and also you've tried to develop the right philosophical approach. I mean, I think perhaps, Cancer, over the last couple of days, there have been things that you needed to work out that you maybe didn't fully understand, and hopefully you ask questions, not just of other people, but you ask questions of yourself, and you reached a point where you had the right stance, and having the right stance is important, because if you don't have the right stance, then it's really difficult to get anything done, because you're unsure of kind of what your underlying philosophy is, what your underlying beliefs are. But having made up your mind and having worked out what is true, and perhaps also working out what is a pack of lies, once you've worked that all out, you're ready to make your move, and you're ready to make things happen. And the balance of this may, to an extent, depend on where you are. I think if you are in the Americas, it's going to very much be a question of, you have made your decision, you've worked out what you need to do, you're ready. If you're in Europe, Africa, then perhaps the first half of the day you're still in a process of trying to understand things, and then later in the day you're ready. It's time to make things happen. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, I think that over the course of the day it's going to be quite exploratory, and it may not be until tomorrow that you're really ready to take the initiative. So there is a time zone issue here, but we do have the moon making a sextile to Venus, and that really doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter where your time zone is. The moon is applying to a sextile of Venus. It's also applying to a sextile of Pluto. And so, wherever you are with that moon aspecting the Venus-Pluto conjunction, I think that you're aware that you are in control and that you are having an impact, and that when you say you want something, you don't even have to say it out loud. When you tell yourself that you want something, generally things move your way. People get out of your way, and I think that you can get what you want, and it may just be about willpower. So even if the situation at first sight doesn't seem helpful, you feel there is resistance, that people seem to be holding something back, don't worry about that. If you're asking for the right thing, and you've made up your mind, and you're not philosophically confused, you're clear in your mind about what you want. If you're not sure what you want, then you're not going to make much progress. But if you have a clear picture of what you want, then I think with the moon aspecting Venus and Pluto, I think you should have no difficulty getting it. And it's not just about willpower. I think it's about your people skills and your charisma. You'll be able to get your way. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Leo, the sun is fairly close to a semi-square with Venus at the moment, and it's not that this aspect is exact today, but it's part of something rather ongoing for over the next few days. Sun is 45 degrees from Venus, and of course the reason that this Sun 45-degree Venus aspect continues for so long, it is because the Sun and Venus are moving pretty much at the same speed. Venus will be going ever so slightly faster from the Sun, and so that's why the aspect will eventually peak, and then it will start to widen. But with this Sun aspect, Sun semi-square Venus, there can be a certain uneasiness in terms of dealing with other people, because it's 45-degree aspect, and a 45-degree aspect is somewhat tense, and there's a certain awareness of a mismatch. And so in your social life, I mean, even in your personal life, in terms of relationships, don't assume that you and other people are going to completely be on the same wavelength. You will have different priorities, and this could be relevant. Not just in your personal life. It could be relevant if you're working, you have a career or something to do with business. It may be that Venus doesn't just represent a person; it represents your ambitions, what you're trying to achieve. And again, there's a mismatch. Part of you wants to do something one way, but your ambitions are going in a different way. Or it could be some authority figure is suggesting one thing, you're trying to suggest another thing, and there may just be a disagreement here. And so that disagreement may be something that has to be worked through, and it could, in certain situations, be quite an intense disagreement. It may be about you really wanting to be in control, and someone else also wanting to be in control, and that can be difficult. If two people are trying to play games, and manipulative games, in order to get their way, and they're both trying to play games on each other, that can be quite a complicated outcome. So perhaps you need to sort of integrate the whole thing. Rather than see Sun-Venus semi-square as being a clash, maybe you should see it as being about you, who you are, your ambitions, trying as hard as you can to bring everything together, and through some struggle being able to decide what needs to be done and really use your willpower. Willpower is going to really matter there, and it may be that you're going to need a great deal of concentration today if you want to see things through. And also, Leo, you have to consider the price. Everything has its price, and so I think that you can get your way today, but there may be a cost. And so you have to work out what that cost is, and that cost could be about falling out with someone, or perhaps people changing their view of you. They had seen you in one way, perhaps seen you as being sort of quite a mellow and calm kind of person, but now they're seeing you in a different light. They're realizing perhaps you've got a dark side, or there's a side to you that may not be entirely pleasant, but it's just about power, isn't it? And I know power can often be a dirty word, but you need to have power. You need to be powerful. And I suppose today, Leo, you can be powerful. And you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is starting to make a trine to Mars. In fact, the moon is making a sextile to Venus, it's making a sextile to Pluto, and it's making a trine to Mars. And I think that perhaps may allow you to smooth things over, particularly that moon sextile Venus. There's a real possibility that you ruffle people's feathers today, but at the same time, you do have a certain amount of charm It may not be an immediate charm, and it's a charm you may have to look for, but once you find that charm, Leo, then I'm fairly confident that you can, to some extent, smooth things over. But still, I think that if you reveal your true self, that does have consequences. But then you're a Leo. You do always need to reveal your true self. You don't want to keep things hidden, do you? Virgo. Virgo, it's possibly a day when you want to start withdrawing a little. There are things going on that you're not entirely comfortable with, and it may be best that you do, to some extent, retreat. I mean, there are things you need to work out on your own, in your own way, and there is a question of whether or not you need anyone's help. Do you need anyone's help? I think probably not. I think that, Virgo, perhaps you're transitioning from a stage where other people's presence was inevitable, where there was really nothing much you could do about it. Yes, other people might have been confusing. They might not have been straight with you. They might have said one thing one moment, another thing another moment. It was really quite difficult to know which way to progress. And so that was all a bit confusing. And then you've reached you reached a stage, or you're reaching a stage where I think you want to be more self-sufficient, and you want to take action to secure yourself, and also to generally understand what's going on, and you're not afraid. You understand that there are deep questions out there which need to be answered. Maybe these questions have been forming over the last day or two, and part of you doesn't want the answer, but deep down you know that it's important to get the answer. And so if there's anything bothering you, anything that's a mystery, then it is a time when you need to, I think, resolve the matter. And you are not afraid to look at things which other people might not want to touch. There is something about you that can sort of go into the darkest of places. And I don't necessarily mean that just in a sort of a mental, intellectual level. I think you are physically prepared to go to places which you wouldn't normally go to. So in that case, in that sense, maybe you should be a little careful. But you do have a sort of a gritty braveness to you at the moment. And you perhaps take the view that no stone should be left unturned. But the trouble about taking that view is that you don't know what's underneath the stone, do you? And you have to be very careful picking up stones. There can be dangerous things under those stones. I suppose snakes and scorpions and other stuff like that. So don't be too keen to look for answers, although I suppose, from a heliocentric viewpoint, in the heliocentric chart, there was a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. And that Mercury-Mars conjunction, I suppose, for you, Virgo, is quite motivating. You do want answers, and you're not satisfied with people just obfuscating things. That would really annoy you if you're not given straight answers. And I think a lot of people are not going to be clear with you. You're going to respond very badly. But maybe, Virgo, you should accept that people are not going to be honest with you. It's not that they're being dishonest. They're just not going to tell you the truth. The truth, it may be out there, but you can't expect anyone to tell you what it is. But you can still find the truth. But you need to find the truth in your own way, at your own pace, using your own methods. And in order to do that, Virgo, I don't really think that you need anyone else's help. Libra. Libra, the moon is starting to move into Aries. And of course, Aries is your opposite sign. And so with the moon moving into Aries, you may feel that you have no choice but to consider outside opinions. You'd like to be independent, but with moon in Aries, you just have to consider another view. And if there's anything you want to do today, then it just may be a case that you can't really do it on your own, or at least you're going to need to get someone's permission, or at least let people know about some of your plans, because if you try to be a lone operator, then things might go wrong, or you might not get the support you're looking for. But the moon in Aries, does make a sextile to Venus, and that sextile to Venus is applicable, even if you're in, Australia or New Zealand, where actually in Australia and New Zealand, the moon is in Pisces all day long, pretty much, not until it doesn't move into Aries, I think, until late this evening or even into tomorrow morning. But even then, you still pick up on that moon sextile Venus, because the moon in very late Pisces is making is starting to make that sextile to Venus. And with that moon sextile Venus, I think that that does allow you to get help from other people. It does allow you to, I suppose, state your case. And I think in most cases you'll be able to state your case in a way that sounds reasonable. I mean, it may be the case that you have to be a little bit clever, maybe use a bit of subtle manipulation. I think that is certainly something you can do. And so that might be a way in which you can leverage other people so that they support you. So if you're not getting support at the beginning of the day, you shouldn't regard that as being a permanent state of affairs. You can actually do things to get other people onto your side. And this is especially the case with the moon moving into Aries. Okay, the moon doesn't move into Aries until very late in the evening if you're in Australasia, but in Europe it moves into Aries early afternoon. In America it's in Aries all day, and so, or at least it moves into Aries relatively early in the morning. So I think, Libra, you should be able to get your way. There may be, though, a little bit of a struggle here, because Venus is making a semi-square to the Sun, and so we can see Venus as being you, Venus in Aquarius. Venus wants to do things its own way, and wants to do things which are very special to you. But semi-square to the Sun, you're just aware that something is holding you back. Maybe it's your friends, people you thought you could trust. They're somehow holding you back. But you have what it takes. You've got the ability to make things move. And so, Libra, it's just very important that you don't assume that how things seem at first sight is the way it always has to be, because you are in a position where you can change things and you can use your powers of persuasion. In terms of very close relationships, though, we can't ignore the fact that Venus is moving to an opposition of Mars. Now, that Venus-Mars opposition is not quite there yet, not exact for another 3 or 4 days, but still, we do have Venus in Aquarius opposition Mars in Leo, and that Venus-Mars opposition may suggest that you're starting to become aware that another person is on a different plane from you. You just don't see eye to eye with this person, and the closer you get to this person, then the more obvious it is. So you can try to be persuasive, but as the week progresses, it may become clear that not everyone can be persuaded. And with this Venus-Mars opposition, it may be that you just have to really just accept that you and another person have your differences. There's no room for compromise. And perhaps it's a situation where you have to stay out of someone's way, and they have to stay out of your way until the situation has passed. Because, Venus is making the opposition to Mars. Mars is a malefic. And that Mars may be a person, I suppose it could be a situation that could really frustrate you, could hold you back. Okay, it might be a friend, someone you thought you could trust, but you trust them too much. You spend too much time with them, and they could really bring you to a standstill. So perhaps you need to think ahead, Libra, over the rest of the week, and consider which people you're going to socialize with, and which people you might feel that it's best to avoid. Scorpio, you may feel that you want to be in control in your own way, and that might mean that you don't feel that you need anyone else's help. In fact, you might regard other people's help as just not being useful, and you have got a picture in your head of the way things should be, and that's it. You know what needs to be done, and the rest should flow smoothly. And so it may be a situation where the less you have to do with other people, the better. And one thing that might be happening is that you're starting to become aware of the fact that Venus is moving to an opposition of Mars. So Mars is you. Mars, it's in Leo. It is retrograde. There are certain things that you're not entirely sure about. You might be rethinking them, Mars retrograde, but you're rethinking them in your own way. Yet Venus moving towards an opposition of Mars perhaps represents another person, someone perhaps who thinks they can help, or just someone who just wants to be close to you for whatever reason. And I think that this is a situation that you have to be careful about, because if people get close to you over the next few days, then it may not work out, and you may create the wrong impression, and you may come over as perhaps being harsher than you want to be, or you might just come over as being difficult, a bit cranky maybe. And it's not that you're doing anything wrong, you're just being yourself. And if you were left alone, then there wouldn't be a problem. But it's just when other people start to move into your sphere of influence, that's when the problems start. So maybe, Scorpio, you should try to create sort of boundaries, and make those boundaries perhaps a bit stronger than usual. And once you're in control, then, and once you're alone, I think, I'm not saying you need to be alone all day, all week. It's not like that. But you don't want to have to worry about other people's presence, other people's irritating presence. And that can relate to your home as well. I mean, I'm sure you love your family, but that doesn't mean to say that family members can't make things difficult for you. They can aggravate you, they can agitate you, and they can waste your time, and it can make you feel guilty, I suppose, can't they? So Scorpio, be independent, and you can also be independent and be successful. We shouldn't forget that Mars is in Leo, and in fact the moon is actually making a trine to Mars. And so with the moon making a trine to Mars and Mars being in Leo, there's a lot of really good work you can do. And some of this work may be about going back over old ground. It's perhaps not a time for moving into new territory, rather going back over things that you've done perhaps over the last month or two, making sure that they're all done properly, that it's all been done properly. I think perhaps recently you've done something that you were quite pleased with, but it wasn't quite good enough. At least you don't feel that it was quite good enough. So Scorpio, it might be a time where you just need to have another look at it, and I think that you'll gain quite a lot of satisfaction from just having the second look at it and realizing that it's not perfect. I mean, being quite pleased with your own work, but also knowing that it could be better. So that might be one thing you need to do today, or at least want to do today. Make something that is good into something that is near perfection. And of course, in order to do that, you don't really need anyone's help, and other people's comments and criticism are just going to be, I think, from your perspective, rather unwelcome. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, the moon is starting to move into Aries, and quite when it moves into Aries kind of depends where you are. If you're in the Americas, it moves into Aries in the morning. If you're in Europe, Africa, early afternoon. If you're in Australasia, well, that could be late evening, even into tomorrow. So it does depend, but overall, moon is moving into Aries, and so with the moon moving into Aries, it's a time when you have a good sense of yourself, and I think perhaps you're a little more confident than usual. I think over the last couple of days you haven't always been confident, and sorry about the dog. I'm not quite sure what the dog's worried about, upset about. It must be something important, but there is this sense of growing confidence and a feeling that you can do things without needing other people's help. You have everything in place. It can all be done, and indeed that is what you're supposed to be doing. It's not a time when you should be sort of constantly asking what other people think, what other people's view is, trying to please other people. That's not what it's about, and you have to trust your own judgment, and also do make a special effort to be optimistic today. I think that some Sagittarians might be tempted to sort of do themselves down, sort of underestimate themselves, perhaps think that they're not good enough, they're not talented enough. I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm just trying to warn you about the potential for negativity on your part, and also to tell you that that potential for negativity is really quite unnecessary. So be confident and be yourself, and also choose environments and perhaps people which are most supportive to you. And now I've already suggested that you need to do things your way. It's not a time to be doing things other people's way. That does not mean that other people are useless, that you don't need other people's help and input. You can benefit from other people, provided they are supportive. And if you are in touch with the right people, they may have some surprises for you. They may not know that they are surprising you, but there's just something about their presence and the things they say that you actually might find quite inspiring. So just consider the possibility that the right relationship can have an entirely fortunate and unexpected impact on you. So that is certainly a possibility. But overall, Sagittarius, it's just very important that you put yourself first, and that you really appreciate that it's a day when you can do things that are spectacular, and it's important to be confident. Initial feelings of uncertainty shouldn't trap you. You should be able to move on from them. And as the moon moves into Aries and makes a sextile to Pluto, and it makes a sextile to Venus, then this is a time when you just feel a growing sense of certainty, and your doubts, the doubts should disappear, and you'll I think know for sure that you're on the right track. Capricorn, the moon is moving into Aries, moving from Pisces into Aries, and it may be a time, Capricorn, when you feel that you need, I suppose, a little bit of a break. You've seen what you need to see. I don't think it's a time of surprises, and you just may feel that at some level you want to temporarily just fade away into your own world. I don't mean fade away, I mean just fade away from the public world, the world where you're seen and heard, and just move into your own space. And your family and your home may be quite important to you today. I mean, even though it's a Monday, the weekend is over, but still you are going to value your own space. And I think that some Capricorns may feel that they want to have a long weekend. I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, but I mean, I think that is the way you're going to feel. But I don't think that you should be too much of an introvert, Capricorn, because I do think actually you do have quite a lot to say for yourself, and I think that you have things to say which are important, and you can, I believe, help other people through what you say. And it's a situation where maybe there's a lot of negativity around you. I mean, not negativity that you yourself are experiencing, but maybe other people are experiencing a certain amount of negativity. They don't really know which way things are going. I don't know, maybe it's to do with the fact Mercury is retrograde. People are just a little bit uncertain. But it does seem that you can be quite encouraging and optimistic and enthusiastic, but in a Capricorn way. I mean, Capricorns are not going to just say nice things for the sake of it. They're only going to say nice things if there's actually some basis for it, even perhaps a material basis for it. And so, Capricorn, I think you're going to be quite good at seeing the positive side of things. I mean, in a way, being quite realistic and down to earth about it, yes, but being able to be positive. And if you can give people a blast of your own positivity, I think that that would be a very good thing. And I think that you can really help people sort of move from one state into another state. Though it is also possible in terms of your optimism and positivity, which I think is pretty fundamental to you at the moment, even if you're not inclined to reveal it, you can turn it on yourself. So if you find yourself, for whatever reason, having doubts, being negative, then you kind of need to pinch yourself and look at things in a different way. Make a special effort to see things from in the best possible light. It might seem a little bit false and contrived, but once you get into the swing of things, I think that you're going to start to see new possibilities, and you'll have a chance to really make yourself confident that you're on the right track. And so it might be that over the next day or two you are catching your breath. That is true, and I think you do need space, but at the same time it may be for you a feeling of preparation, that you're preparing for something and you're feeling good about it, feeling increasingly good about it, even if you have to give yourself a pep talk, and then sooner or later you'll be ready for the next move. So in a way, Capricorn, today is what you make of it. I don't think that you are at the mercy of fate. I mean, in terms of fate and free will, with astrology, that's always this tension between fate and free will. I mean, some astrologers pretend there's no such thing as fate. Of course there's fate, but there's always an element of free will. And at the moment, Capricorn, in terms of that scale between fate and free will, I think today we're very much moving towards free will. So in that sense, today, to a great extent, is what you make of it. Aquarius. Aquarius, Venus is, of course, in your sign. It's in the 3rd degree of Aquarius at noon New York time, at 2 degrees 50 Aquarius, and it's also still making that conjunction to Pluto. So with that Venus-Pluto conjunction, which you had sort of over the weekend, it's still around, and I think that you're still able to benefit from it. Yeah, I say benefit. I think that the Venus conjunct Pluto in Aquarius is positive, and it allows you to come over in quite a powerful way, and you are, I suppose, at the moment quite well defended. You know how to look after yourself, and maybe you've got a steel aura. It's always good for Aquarians to have a steel aura, isn't it? No one can get through your aura without your permission. And are you going to give anyone permission? No. I mean, I suppose your aura is not something you give free passes to. It's you, and yes, you do know how to look after yourself. But Venus in Aquarius is starting to make an opposition to Mars. Now, that Venus-Mars opposition is not exact for a few days, but you're perhaps aware of potential threats. People knocking on the door, people trying to get your attention, and you perhaps don't take kindly to it. So it's building up, this Venus-Mars opposition. And so I do think with this Venus-Mars opposition, you are aware of the difference between sort of self and others, and you want to maintain that difference. You don't want any blurred boundaries, and that is typically Aquarian. Aquarius, fixed, air sign, wants to be in control, doesn't want any ambiguity. But you don't have to go through the whole day as some kind of human tank. In fact, you can brighten your world. It's absolutely possible for you to do this. From behind your secure boundaries, you can really have a very fortunate impact. There's just something about you that is really optimistic. There is a strong sense of optimism here, and once you're feeling secure, you just feel that things are going well, and you should make a special effort to believe that things are going well, not just in terms of yourself, but also in terms of other people. So if other people are bothered about something, then your intervention can actually make a big difference. And so, do try as far as is possible to get people to be positive, get people to cheer up. If people are miserable, then there might be something about you that can change the situation. And it's not that you're going to be emotional about it. One thinks about cheering people up as being some kind of emotional exercise. It's not. It can be, but not in your case. It's about presenting people with alternative ways of thinking and demonstrating to them that single things can be thought about in many different ways, and what seems to be a problem can actually be an opportunity. And that's certainly something that you can really present. And your communication skills are helped by the fact that the moon is moving from Pisces into Aries. Okay, that the moon might not move into Aries until late tonight if you're in Australasia, or even tomorrow morning, I think, if you're in New Zealand. But still, the moon is moving into Aries, whether it's today or tomorrow. And the moon in Aries does make a sextile to Venus, makes a sextile to Pluto. And so that really does give you the chance to really come out of your shell, to really express what you believe, and you can also be very dynamic about it, and people will pay attention, and you can create a change of focus. Perhaps what's bothering people is that they're focusing on the wrong thing, and if you actually look at what people are doing, they're distracted, but you can force them to focus on things which are positive and life-giving and life-enhancing. So, Aquarius, you have a job to do today. Okay, you have to start, of course, by feeling good about yourself, but once you feel good about yourself, I think you can make everyone else feel good about themselves. So today, Aquarius, you're very much a plus. Pisces. Pisces, the moon is moving out of your sign and into Aries. Now, just before the moon leaves Pisces, it makes a conjunction to Neptune. And so with that Moon-Neptune conjunction, I think that there may be something about you that is a little bit nebulous. You're not giving everything away, and at times you may be someone who is a little bit difficult to understand, and I think that's the way you like it. You don't want to be an open book, and it's not that you're hiding things by closing the shutters down. That's one way of hiding things. You're more putting up smoke screens, and so people can't see you, or you're distracting them, or you're perhaps saying things that, I won't say they're necessarily lies, but they're kind of false leads. And so you're going to be quite clever in that way. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why would you want to put up a smokescreen? Well, your motives might not be always right. It's possible that for some reason, Pisces, you are doing yourself down, maybe. You're having a certain sense of negativity about yourself and what you can do, and it's just passing. It's, in a way, is unnecessary, but for one reason or another, you just might feel that there are things you just can't do, and I would urge you to consider the reasons for any inaction you might have. Now, one reason you might not be taking taking the initiative is because you've convinced yourself that something is impossible. And perhaps you need to look at it again. Maybe you've got your calculations wrong. Or maybe you're in a situation where you are reminded of the past. Perhaps you did something in the past that didn't work out, and you're doing it again, and the past is informing you, and you feel really there's no point. It didn't work in the past, and it's therefore not going to work in the present. So, Pisces, I would urge you not to take that view. I think you do have to be positive and tell yourself that this time it's different, that you're dealing with an independent event. Events are independent. At least today they're independent. Although you seem to think that they are all linked up, they're not linked up. What happened in the past has got nothing to do with what's happening in the present. So I think that is important. And what you'd also, in terms of smoke screens, smoke screens might be a good way of distracting other people, but you might get caught up in your own smoke screen. So you put up smoke screens, and you, in the end, you can't see what you're doing, and your default position is to think there's no point. But so perhaps, Pisces, there's a sense in which you have to get yourself together. Now, the moon does change sign. It moves out of Pisces into Aries, and that's probably a good thing. I mean, I know it's nice having a moon in your own sign, but moon in Aries does create a change. Maybe it's a breath of fresh air. And with the moon in Aries, you perhaps get a clearer idea about what's important. Now, of course, the moon moving into Aries, it might happen this morning if you're in the Americas. It might happen late tonight or even tomorrow morning if you're in Australasia. So it does depend where you are, but still, at some stage, the moon does move into Aries. And I think that with moon in Aries, you have a new sort of state of mind. I think you're going to be more realistic. You'll perhaps realize what you can do, and it might be relevant to money. There's a possibility with moon moving into Aries. It's about being very definite about money. It's not a time when you want to be confused. We don't want to have smoke screens. You need to take action. So if money is important at the moment, and if there's a financial issue that has been sort of in the background that you've perhaps pushed to one side, I think today might be the time when you really need to get to grips with it. Okay, it could be tomorrow, but no later than tomorrow. So ask yourself what needs to be done. Something financial that you've perhaps put on ice, that you've delayed. Well, yeah, now might be the time to do it, and it is the right thing to do it, and it's just important to keep it simple. It's not about coming up with all sorts of reasons why you can't do something. It's complicated and really there's no point in trying. Or you might even convince yourself that a sum of money that actually you are entitled to, that you might convince yourself that there's no point in trying. But there is a point in trying. And so from a financial perspective, today and perhaps tomorrow, it's worth making the effort. You make the effort, and I think, in the end, you will prevail. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 64, before completion. 64 is the last hexagram of the book. And one of the images of before completion is crossing a river. We're nearly there. We're trying to get to the far bank, but we're not there yet. So there is a sense of work in progress, and we can't be complacent because we haven't arrived yet. Now, there is a single moving line. The fifth line moves, and The fifth line in I Ching tends to be the most fortunate, and it does indicate success. It suggests that we are going to make it, and we're going to get to the other side. I mean, not literally. I absolutely must make it clear, I'm not encouraging you to swim across rivers. I'm using river as a symbol. And so there's a sense that we're working towards something, and suddenly we make it. It comes together, and there's just a feeling that we've made it, and we're now in something new, because we have made that successful transition. And so that is cause for celebration. Now, we have to remember that this is a hexagram I just do for the day. I mean, this is a daily I Ching. So we have to get it in perspective. This is about something you've been trying to do today, something you perhaps at the beginning of the day you weren't quite finished with it, but over the course of the day you can finish it. And so that, I think, is quite encouraging. So I don't know what you're doing at the moment. I don't know what you're involved with. But if you are sort of half finished with something and you're not quite sure whether you're going to finish, and it does seem you can finish it. So that's good news. Then the fifth line moves. Now that is a bit of a contradiction here, because the fifth line is a fortunate line. It indicates that everything comes together. This is something new we're in. We've made the transition. But you see, if the fifth line moves, that means that the top trigram becomes all unbroken lines, and then the bottom trigram is the abyss. It's not a pleasant hexagram that we move to, as you will see when we look at what this moves to. And it moves to hexagram number 6, which is conflict. So we get the idea of completing something, doing it really well, maybe even moving into something new, a new space. But the moment we do that, we hit a conflict. Now, I don't think that this takes away from the fact that, broadly speaking, things look good, because you have been successful. You've made it. But then we move to conflict. So it's almost like, because you've been successful at something, because you've made a transition, you're now in something new. You've got what you want, but you're not happy about it. And there are things to complain about. And it just may be that conflict is, you're expecting too much. You think about, what do you really want? So you get what you want, and as soon as you got what you want, you start complaining. I mean, that is one way of looking at it. Or if you've made a transition from one place to another, straight away, that creates new complications. I mean, you had to make that transition. I mean, that was important. But you make that transition, new complications, new people to argue with. Perhaps it's not arguing with other people, it may be arguing with yourself, but there is certainly something I think you want to complain about. And I think in this case, I would just say that this is actually a positive, because it shows that there's progress, even though it might not feel like progress. So today, be grateful. Be grateful that you can make a transition. Be grateful that you can make things better. But just because you've made things better doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect. When you make progress, that always creates new complications, and that is just the way it is. So now I want to look at the horoscope of Brian Thompson, and I do this with a certain amount of trepidation, because he is, well, okay, he's dead now, but the view on his death is all over the place. You've got people just seeing it as just someone who's murdered in the street. That's how terrible that is. And you've got other people saying that at some level he had it coming to him, because he was CEO of an insurance company, and an insurance company which I believe had a high rate of denials. So this is, of course, I'm coming from Europe. Of course, I live in the United States, but from a European perspective, Europeans do find this whole concept of private health insurance. I mean, I know Europeans have private health insurance, certainly in the UK. I've heard, if you want proper health coverage, you can't entirely rely on the NHS, and people often have to get private healthcare just to cover them, because the NHS might take you months and months and months to get an appointment. So if you've got private health insurance, it might be expensive, but at least you can get to see a specialist quickly. So I don't want anyone, for example, if you're in America, to take the view that I'm just being critical of the American health system, when certainly the health system in the UK has a lot to be desired. So I'm not singling out America here, but I do know that in America, this concept of private healthcare and health insurance companies, they are making a lot of money, and in order to make a lot of money, I suppose they have to cut down on their overheads. And one way of cutting down on overheads is to deny treatment and say it's too expensive, and so that is an issue. So turning to the horoscope of Brian Thompson, I don't have a time of birth for him. I do have a date of birth. So he was born he was born in Jewel, Iowa. And if you take his noon chart, he has the moon at 25 Pisces. So he probably has the moon in Pisces, but we don't know this for sure. He could have the moon in Aries if he was born late in the day. And so he was CEO of United Healthcare. I believe that his salary was something like $10 million a year, and that I read somewhere that his net worth was about $43 million. So he was a very rich man, and he was getting rich from a company he didn't start. United Healthcare wasn't a company he started. It wasn't like he was an entrepreneur like Bill Gates or Elon Musk, who started his own company. And so I suppose if you start your own company and it is your company, you can pay yourself what you like. But he worked his way up through the company. I think he was originally an accountant, and so this is his chart. And so I want to start by looking at what makes his chart special. I mean, is it special? Now, he has no Earth in his chart. No, nothing in Capricorn, nothing in Virgo, nothing in Taurus. Very often when I look at a chart, I like to look at the elements first. And when you're dealing with no Earth, that reminds us that Donald Trump doesn't have any Earth in his chart. I mean, no personal or social planets are in Earth. So the Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, I don't really count those three planets when I do the elemental balances. The United States does not have any planets in Earth. Okay, it has Neptune in an Earth sign, but again, I don't count Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So in a way, that's kind of reflective of the United States. He has no Earth. So what happens if you've got no Earth in your chart? If you've got no Earth in your chart, you can have one of two possibilities. One possibility is that you're just somehow you don't really care about material things. There are other things to worry about. But so often when people don't have any Earth in their chart, they regard money as being overly important. Like Donald Trump, no Earth in his chart. Donald Trump, whatever you think of him, clearly Donald Trump is a man that regards money as being really important. He always talks about money and the possibilities of making more money. How Donald Trump is really, when he was president, he's really obsessed with the stock market. And that's just the way he is. I must make clear, I'm not making any criticism of Donald Trump here. I'm just trying to explain his lack of earth. And so with Brian Thompson, his lack of earth, because he doesn't have it in his chart, because he doesn't have it on almost a kind of a spiritual sense, he doesn't understand the meaning of earth. He tries to make it happen in the real world. So he's attracted to high salaries. He's attracted to getting as much money as possible. I think he was under investigation for insider trading. That's just a thing that someone with no earth would do. Which is, well, let's make some money. Let's sell these shares. Let's do this. So that can be no earth, and no earth can be. There can also be a certain lack of grounding and perhaps a losing sense of what your company is all about. The company is all about, from a moral perspective, is about providing health insurance. It's not just about maximizing your income. Well, of course it is, because I suppose it's on the stock market. You're there to increase the balance sheet. So with no earth, you might take the view, we will do everything we can to increase our profits. And so no earth might actually lead to a kind of flawed approach where you think that, well, let's deny as much as possible, because that's what matters. That's what really matters. And so that can be earth sort of moving out of control. So that's one way in which we can see the lack of earth. Now, he has a lot of water signs. Potentially, he's got 5 planets in water signs. It could be 4. We don't know where his moon is. So he's got Sun, Saturn, Mercury, and Jupiter in water signs, and possibly the moon. Now, you might then be saying, well, moon in Cancer. I mean, he's a nice, sympathetic, warm person. He's not going to do anything to deny people coverage. He's a sympathetic person. I mean, that is one way of looking at water. But what is Cancer really about? Cancer is about loyalty. It's about the clan. It's about the group. And it may be about my group, your group. I'm this, you're that. Clan. Do think of that. Scotland is a country which one associates with clans. Scotland is also a Cancerian country. Traditionally, you look at William Lilly, Christian Astrology, he mentions Scotland as being a Cancer country. So it's your clan, it's your group, or it's your company. So it may be that a lot of that Sun, Saturn, Mercury gets channeled into his company. A loyal member of a company, has worked his way through his company, he owes a lot to his company, so he's going to do whatever he can for his company. And that means he's going to do whatever he can to increase company profits. And that might mean trying to work out systems to cut your overheads. And of course, cutting your overheads, one way of cutting your overheads is to deny people insurance. And if you possibly can get away with it. I mean, obviously, you can't deny everyone. Obviously, this, I assume, applies for non-standard things, like if someone needs complicated surgery or needs an expensive drug. You try to save money like that, and I suppose if you do it on a global level, people might die as a result, but does that matter? Because Sun in Cancer, and well, not just Sun in Cancer, but those Cancer planets are saying, well, it's about his group, it's about him, it's about his interests, the interests of the people he cares for. It's not about everyone's interests, and there can be a clannishness to Cancer which could work like this. And so those deaths outside are perhaps not, strictly speaking, relevant. Maybe. I mean, and this does actually relate to the United States, and I'll go into that a little bit later when I compare his chart with the United States chart. And additionally, he has a square aspect between Mercury and Pluto, sort of Mercury in Cancer square Pluto. So that may be part of his strength. I mean, that suggests that he's, I suppose, got a good mind, is thinking perhaps very deeply, about how to run a business and perhaps how to maximize the profits of his business. And what I also find interesting is his connection between the Venus-Jupiter square. So there's a Venus-Jupiter square. You see, he's got Venus in Gemini, square Jupiter in Pisces, and Venus is conjunct the South Node. Sorry about the dog, but you shouldn't worry about the dog barking. This is a serious matter. Around Thompson's chart. This is not just for entertainment. So Venus conjunct the South Node, square Jupiter. So Venus conjunct the South Node is a bit weird, isn't it? I mean, Venus conjunct the South Node is about other people, about how he relates to other people. Venus in Gemini, I suppose in this case, could be a little bit callous. In terms of human feeling, it may be, again, Gemini is a double-bodied sign. You split off one thing from another. And there may be something a little bit schizoid about Venus in Gemini. Schizoid as in separating out, being able to forget one's human feelings for people denied coverage, because you're able to convince yourself that there's some other higher good, well, like the good of the company, for example. And so his Venus is square Jupiter. I mean, Venus square Jupiter does seem to be somewhat sort of indulgent. I mean, Venus square Jupiter might be greedy. I mean, that is possible. Wanting more of things. I mean, that could be a manifestation, but it is well, Jupiter is square the South Node, so that is a possible manifestation. But we do get this Venus, Jupiter, and the nodes are all together, and I suppose we're thinking about what is his path, what is his karma, where, I don't like to use the word karma, but his North Node is in Sagittarius. At some level, he's not really getting into that North Node, perhaps in Sagittarius. North Node in Sagittarius, maybe about being moral, having a moral compass, because Sagittarius is a very moral sign because it's ruled by Jupiter. And perhaps because Jupiter is square North Node and Venus in Gemini is conjunct the South Node, there may be a moral issue there. Now, the planets, or the pair of planets that I find most interesting is Mars and Saturn. And, this reminds us that there is an aspect that I don't think astrologers use very much. I don't use very much. I'm aware of the aspect. I did when I was doing my diploma in astrology in the 80s from the Faculty of Astrological Studies. I did a course in midpoints and harmonics when we looked at the ninth harmonic. And what the ninth harmonic is when you divide the wheel by 9. And so the ninth harmonic aspects are 40 degrees, 80 degrees, 160 degrees. A trine is a ninth harmonic aspect. And his Mars and his Saturn, you can see his Mars and his Saturn are 40 degrees apart. And so you might be thinking, well, so what? 40 degrees. What's the big deal about 40 degrees? Well, it's a ninth of the circle. And I was reading Charles Harvey and Michael Harding's Working with Astrology, just to remind myself of the ninth harmonic. And Charles Harvey wrote a chapter on the ninth harmonic, and he was talking about, he gave examples of the ninth harmonic and what it means. And he talked about the ninth harmonic as a guiding principle, as something you're aspiring to. So it's quite a spiritual thing, the number 9. As far as he's concerned, it is our guiding principle. And so in his case, he's got Mars-Saturn conjunction. Well, it's a Mars-Saturn conjunction on the ninth harmonic. Let me just show you the ninth harmonic. So if there's Brian Thompson's chart. If we multiply every planet's zodiacal degree by 9, we get to the ninth harmonic chart. So here is his ninth harmonic chart. So you can see on the ninth harmonic, he's got a Mars-Saturn conjunction. So in a way, that Mars-Saturn conjunction is about his guiding principle. And it's about death, isn't it? Mars-Saturn. I mean, there may be other interpretations of it, but what we know publicly, death is part of his guiding principle. Matters of life and death are part of his guiding principle. And it might be something that he feels almost to be inspiring. And so, I mean, this is, I don't know whether I'm right on this, but I'm just wondering, what is Brian Thompson's attitude to people dying because they're denied coverage? And clearly this is happening, or this is happening in United Healthcare. And yeah, he has that Mars-Saturn conjunction on the ninth harmonic, which is a 40-degree aspect on his 40-degree aspect in his natal chart. So it seems to me that he was somehow aware of this, and it might be an attitude to his own death. It may be an attitude to other people's death, and how he saw his own death. And I mean, I don't want to say that he's reveling in death. I mean, that's not the case. I mean, I would just want, if you look at people who, I mean, the only person I could find who also had a Sun Saturn 40-degree a Mars Saturn 40-degree aspect. This is Ali Hassan al-Majid. So he had Mars Saturn at around 40 degrees. Now he was better known as Chemical Ali. Now he was obviously famous for or infamous for dropping nerve gas on that Kurdish city in Iraq. And he was eventually hanged. So he certainly had an attitude to death. And someone else who had the 80-degree aspect, I don't know, I was just sort of looking around, was Konstantin Rokossovsky. So he was a marshal in the Second World War. And what's interesting about him is that he was arrested during Stalin's purges. And he was tortured, he had his teeth smashed in, and he refused to sign the confession. And because he just refused to sign the confession, he was eventually released and allowed back into the army. I mean, amazingly, he survived the purges and was he was allowed to go back into the Soviet army and became a marshal. And but he had Mars and Saturn. If there's his Mars and his Saturn, where's his Mars and his Saturn? You see, he had Mars and Saturn in the 160 degrees apart, so, but still a Mars-Saturn conjunction on the ninth harmonic. But he was really concerned about death all the time. He apparently always carried, after he was released, he always had a gun around, because he said to himself he's never going to get arrested again. He was going to shoot himself, I think, or that was after he was released. So that sort of death was kind of very sort of important to him. Another person who's got Mars-Saturn, this Mars-Saturn aspect is me. There's my Mars at 0 degrees Taurus, and there's Saturn. So my Mars and Saturn are 80 degrees apart, so it's in that 40, 80, 120, 160 series. So I have that Mars-Saturn connection. If you look at my videos for long enough, you'll know that I'm pretty obsessed about death. I keep talking about death, and I'm talking about death now. So it's somehow death for me is a guiding principle, perhaps. So that's me. But anyway, I think that this Mars-Saturn 40-degree aspect in Brian Thompson's horoscope, I think is important, and perhaps it's not just about his attitude to death before he died, but it was just the way he died, and it was saying something about his death in terms of how America responded to it, because many people in America have zero sympathy for him. it's about memes. There's a feeling that he deserved it, and so maybe his death is a guiding principle for other people looking at his death. I mean, that is perhaps quite a worrying concern. And then there's the question about his link with the United States. So, and I do think that he is in many respects an American. I mean, there's something very American about it all. And so, there is the United States chart. So let's look at no, that's the killing itself. So Brian Thompson was a Cancerian. He had a lot of planets in Cancer, and America is Cancerian. So he's a Cancerian who has done well or did well in a Cancerian country. And it kind of makes me think about what it means for America and it being a Cancer country. And I do think, in terms of my observations about America, is that America, in a way like Scotland, is a very clannish country. You look after your own interests. You have your family. That's the fundamental point. Or perhaps you have your company, you have your group. People talk a lot about America and race, racial divisions in America. But, the longer I live in America, the more I'm thinking it's not really about race, it's about class. Class is, we think about, I come from Britain, class-ridden society, but America I think, is just as class-ridden as Britain, maybe even more so. And so you look after your class or your subclass, and that's, I suppose, immigrants to America, they came in with their religious views and they stuck together maybe. And so he's very much part of that. So he was loyal to his company, he was loyal to his family. But his clients, the clients of his company, they're not important to him. And that's a very American thing. It's a divided society. As a symbol of America represents. It's like it's like the chaos you have here of different jurisdictions clashing with each other, different utility companies using the same telephone pole or whatever, but it is a divided society, and perhaps more, every society is divided, but I do think that with his Cancerian nature, he does chime with what the problem of America is. And I think that at some level, my guess is, with all those planets in Cancer, he was just focused on his group, on his clan, the things that were important to him, and the interests of the people out there, the people being denied coverage. I think they were probably dehumanized. And I think that can be a Cancerian thing. And I can't think that he perhaps represents the dark side of the sign Cancer. At least that's a possibility. Look at, but then his Pluto. There's his Pluto. His Pluto is square America's Venus and its Jupiter, and his Saturn. His Saturn is so his Saturn and his Pluto, his Mercury's Pluto square is hitting America. Maybe his Pluto hitting America's Jupiter. It's through his death he's revealed something new about America, and there's something about him that is actually undermining of America, because America has a Sun-Jupiter conjunction. And you could say that the best possible thing about the Sun-Jupiter conjunction is about not just being optimistic, but perhaps being humanitarian. It needn't always be clannish. But his Saturn on the Sun-Jupiter midpoint in America, he's perhaps representing the worst in America with that Saturn on the Sun-Jupiter midpoint. But that Sun-Jupiter is perhaps trying to, in terms of people's response to his death, people are perhaps trying to move beyond that clannishness. And so maybe his death has just reminded everyone in America that how bad things are, but perhaps how things need to change. And then there is the death itself. So here is his death. I don't really want to say much about his death. Here's a chart of his killing. I've gone for 6:44 a.m. In New York on December the 4th, 2024. And you can see that it's just before sunrise. And there was this Mercury-Jupiter opposition when it happened, and Neptune was on the IC. His moon at noon was around 25, was at the end of Pisces. So maybe his Neptune on his moon, that represented transiting his moon, had something to do with that, but we don't really know where his moon sort of actually is for sure. So this happened, of course, just as Mars was about to go retrograde. Now, I'm interested in this because I want to look at his solar arc directions. I didn't find any direct transits going on. I mean, it wasn't that spectacular. But in terms of his solar arc directions, here is his solar arc direction. So he was 50 when he was killed, and so you would move the planets about 50 degrees. In fact, it's about 48. So the solar arc direction is around 48 degrees. So in terms of his solar arc directions, he has a Venus-Jupiter. Let me just show you this. He has a Venus-Jupiter square. So let's put his solar arc directions on the outer wheel. So there's his Venus-Jupiter square, and so we move this forward 50 degrees, and so, or in fact 48 degrees. So Jupiter has moved to 6 degrees 10 minutes Taurus, and so Venus has moved to 5:46 Taurus. Now, I don't normally look at transits to solar arc directions, but it's just so interesting that Mars went stationary direct at 6 degrees Leo. And in other words, Mars went stationary direct exactly square his directed Jupiter and exactly conjunct his directed Venus, which made me think, what midpoints was it hitting? So he had his sun Hades midpoint at 6 degrees at 5 degrees 55 fixed signs. So let's just start to and he had his Mars Uranus midpoint at 6:35 fixed. So let me just go back to his chart just to show you what I mean. Here's his chart. So there's his Mars Uranus midpoint. So the Mars Uranus midpoint is at 21. It's about 21 Virgo. So that means that Mars was making a semi-square to his Mars Uranus midpoint, and also his Sun Hades midpoint. If we actually look at all his hypothetical planets, so there's his Sun Hades midpoint. There's his Sun. There's his Sun, and where is his Hades gone? So Hades is about sort of death and, so I suppose, criminality, and so there is his Sun. There is his Hades. So again, his Sun Hades midpoint is at around 21 Gemini, which, so the semi-square of that would be 5 or 6 of a fixed sign. So what's happened is that at the time of his death, Mars went stationary on his Sun Hades midpoint and on his Mars Uranus midpoint, and at a time when directed Jupiter and directed Venus, and to an extent the directed node were all on this point. So that was his moment of vulnerability. But I don't have a time of birth for Brian Thompson, and so it is difficult. And it may be that his own chart doesn't really matter. I mean, he died, I suppose, for a reason, and it was just something going on in America, and he is, I suppose, representative of corporate greed, and it's something that people have been talking about a lot, and so it's put this into the spotlight. Sure, CEOs of other insurance companies might now be increasing their security, but the point is the action has been done, and people are asking questions about the ethics of medical insurance, plus the huge wage differences in America, and it's all happening as Trump becomes president. Anyway, those are a few thoughts about Brian Thompson. I'll probably be returning to the topic in a later video. So sorry, that was a bit rambling on Brian Thompson. I could have been a bit more precise, perhaps, but I think that was something I did want to look at. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.